Why aren't you seeing any progress? You might not be wrong, but the numbers might be. Labels lie, and so do serving sizes. Let's talk about real world foods people mistrack. Hello, I'm Marcus Hoff. I'm a personal trainer with the goal of getting you from where you are to where you want to be. So, you've been tracking your food, weighing everything out, scanning the barcodes, doing all of that. I'm sure it's really fun. It's the most annoying, time-consuming part of tracking your calories. But say you've been doing that right. Why aren't you seeing any progress? You've been putting in all that effort. Shouldn't you be getting the reward? You might not be wrong, but the numbers might be. Calorie tracking isn't perfect. Here's why. Let's start with the fact that the numbers aren't always accurate. Many recipes, especially ones online, measure in cups and spoons instead of grams. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. The problem comes in when it's not standardized. 1 cup in the UK isn't the same as a cup in the US. So, if you have an American recipe and using UK cup measurements, then you're going to be getting an inaccurate result. Even within the same country, people scoop differently. Some people go all the way to the brim, and some people don't. There's very small differences between the two, but it's still noticeable nonetheless when you've got cup after cup after cup going into a recipe, especially if it's going to be for a day's worth of food. Like personally, I'm a to the brim kind of guy. If it says 1 spoonful, that spoon is getting filled, okay? Even if it means some of it's going to end up on the kitchen counter. Especially if it's something that I enjoy, like honey or whatever. That thing's getting filled to the brim. These factors, as well as others, make sure that even if you are following the recipe correctly, you can get different results each time. Different results means different calories. Even if the margin of error is so small, so say it's only a tiny bit more in the scoopful, eventually it adds up, especially if it's something higher calorie dense, like your honey, your peanut butter, and all of that. A tiny bit is still a lot of calories, as opposed to say a no calorie sweetener, where it doesn't really matter if you add in a bit more, a bit less. I always go for a bit more though. I don't know why, but if I'm making any sort of cereal recipe, it just tastes so much sweeter and nicer. Why cup measurements mess up your calories? That one food you logged might be 100 calories off. Most recipes use cup or teaspoon measurements, but volume-based measurements can be inconsistent. If the option is there, try to use grams in a scale, not just volume. What about when that's not possible? Just do your best and round as close as you can. Labels lie, and so do serving sizes. Let's talk about food labels. Manufacturers are allowed to round calories on labels. Sometimes the food within has higher calories than it says on the tin. And one of the funniest things that they do is manipulate the serving sizes to make things look healthier. So say, 1 serving size is only 50 calories, and it's like a teaspoonful. It's like realistically no one's gonna have that. Especially when it comes to like cereals. When it says 1 serving size, it's not even a bowlful. It's not even usually half a bowlful. It's like, what do they expect people to eat cereal out of, like an egg cup? It's the most disingenuous thing, but it's so funny. That's why you should just totally ignore serving sizes on the labels. A better place to look is the per 100 grams, because then you can compare the two. If you have one food with one label and another food with another, the best way to compare the two is by looking at how many calories it is per 100 grams, or how much protein per 100 grams. Instead of going by 1 serving size, where on one packet it might be twice the size as another. So here's an example. Say if you have a bag of granola that says it's 120 calories per serving, and the serving size is 30 grams. You might think that sounds a lot, but when you put it on a scale, in a bowl on a scale, don't just pour granola onto a scale like an absolute insane person. Put it in a bowl on a scale, and you'll realize how little it actually is. Especially when any normal person who just goes for a bowl of cereal, like imagine going for a bowl of cereal, it's crazy. Imagine not measuring everything to the microgram. They might be having 60 grams or even more. So a serving to them is much higher than it says on the tin. So it's not going to end up being the 120 grams as it says on the packet. It's also crazy how high calorie granola actually is. I used to have bowls of it because I didn't know about calories, didn't know any of that. And then you just realize it's thousands of calories. It's actually insane. If you are struggling to get the food in, instead of having Rice Krispies, swapping out for granola, you're gonna instantly get a few more 100 calories in. Plus granola's nice anyway, so it's a win-win. Add some fruit on the top of it, absolutely beautiful. But what's the big deal about just one meal? Now, multiply it across all the meals throughout the day. Especially if you're going to have 4 to 5 meals a day. to help maximize protein synthesis. If each meal is that far off, what's the point in tracking it in the first place? You're spending all that time and effort logging into NutriCheck or MyFitnessPal or just the Notes app on your phone, and it's all for nothing. You're spending all of that time and effort when a serving size isn't an actual serving size. It might be the correct serving size for a rabbit, not 150 kg roided up maniac, okay? It means that you're easily going to be hundreds of calories off when you didn't even do anything wrong. Then you're wondering why some days you're gaining weight and some days you're losing weight. Some weeks you're managing to hit your goals and other weeks you're not. Putting all that time and effort in to do everything correctly, and you've been lied to. That's why it's so frustrating, and that's why I tell clients, don't focus on the serving sizes. Focus on the actual amount of food that you are eating. This label trick is making you eat more. Low calorie snack, healthy meal, only 50 calories. Food companies want you to believe that their product is healthy or low calorie as a marketing device to get you to buy it. But here's how they trick you. Companies can legally round down the amount of calories that they say on the label because of a margin of error. So even if you do avoid the serving size myth and you look at the exact calories of the exact amount of food that you're eating, it could still be off, albeit off by a tiny margin. Realistically, there's not going to be anything that you can do to change that. What your best bet is to continue eating the way that you are, comparing the calories to how much weight you are gaining or losing. Then you'll be able to tell how much of a deficit or surplus that you're in, instead of analysing each individual meal exactly. Because you might be eating 100 calories more than you think. Just because you added up all the labels doesn't mean that it's going to be correct. What really matters is the outcome. How much are you gaining? How much are you losing? That's going to be a closer representation to reality than just purely adding up the numbers on the label. Use it as more of a guide so you know roughly where you're at. Then adjust your calories in accordance with the results that you're getting. Don't trust the labels, trust the results. Examples you're probably getting wrong. Let's talk about real world foods people mistrack. Egg whites. Depending on if you separate them yourself or use a carton, the volume and weight can vary, and so does the calorie count. With egg whites, it's also important for tracking the protein, because I'm assuming that you're not just drinking liquid egg whites for fun. If you don't care about taste, it is actually a pretty good way to get a lot of protein in with fewer calories. Don't just drink it off the bat though. Add it to a protein shake, and if you're ready to endure that level of torture, it's actually got decent macros. I remember doing a protein shake. That was 5 scoops of protein powder. This was when I started. It was 5 scoops of protein powder and just purely egg whites. I think it was like 130 grams of protein. It was the most vile thing I've ever tasted. To be fair, wakes you up in the morning. It was so terrible, but you get so much protein in so quickly. You gotta weigh up the pros and cons a bit. Alcohol and other liquid calories are so difficult to track, especially if you're drunk. The actual serving size of a can or a bottle might be an awkward amount. So say with Red Bulls, most of the cans are 250 milliliters, whereas others are 355 milliliters. That's a whole lot of maths to figure out if the serving size isn't exactly 355 milliliters. If a serving size on a drink label doesn't match how much is in a can or how much is in a bottle, it's going to be so much more difficult to figure out. Now Red Bull are good at this. On the serving size, it usually says 1 can, but be careful about this. Make sure that the serving size is actually how much you are going to be drinking, and then take that into account when tracking your calories. So, what to do instead? Don't stress over every gram. So here's what I recommend. Try to be as accurate as possible, but prioritize the results that you're getting. You might add up all the labels, and it's an example that's not going to be realistic, but if you're mistracking something, if you're not taking into account the amount of calories in, say, the liquids that you're having, you think you're on 1,500 calories. You're actually on 2,500. The only way to realize that is by looking at the results, is by looking at the weight gain. So realistically, just take into account the fact that there might be things out of your own control, that you might not be even thinking about adding in calories from this source, or that source, or actually source is the correct term, yeah, because there are a lot of calories hidden in, say, ketchups that you might not think about tracking. So the results will speak for themselves. Taking all of this into account, you might think, what's the point in tracking anyway? Because 99% of the time it's going to be accurate, or it's going to be as accurate as it can be. Some days you're going to move more than others, meaning you're going to burn more calories. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter if one meal is 665 calories instead of 664. Track the calories, be consistent, just make sure that's not all you're tracking. Some days you might overtrack. Some days you might overestimate the calories, other days you might underestimate. Eventually it's going to even out. How I track calories. If you don't have access to, say, a MyFitnessPal or a NutriCheck, and you're doing the calculations yourself, it's okay to round to the nearest 10 calories to make it easier for yourself. That's what I used to do. Some of the foods I'd round up to the nearest 10 calories, and then some of the foods I'd round down. Eventually it'll all even out. It also makes it a whole lot easier for yourself to remember, okay, this food is this many calories, that food's going to be around that many calories. We're not trying to track to 664 calories, for example. I personally just found it a lot easier to track to, say, 660. Obviously, having an app like NutriCheck or MyFitnessPal that does it for you, don't make it more difficult on yourself than it needs to be. Tracking takes time and effort, but it gets easier the longer you keep in that habit. Don't stop tracking your calories as soon as you're done with a diet. That's a massive mistake. Track whether you're in a cut or a bulk. Go to ExcaliburEmpower.com to lift your limits and forge your future.